2005 Toyota Corolla driver side inner CV boot replacement. I'm Brian Eslick from How to Automotive, and we'll walk you through that process. So we're going to start by getting this vehicle in the air. If you're doing this at home, you could jack it up as high as you can with floor jacks and jack stands, and put the jack stands right here on the little, there's a little lip on the underside of the rocker panel hood. Put the jack stands as high as you can get it, and you need the suspension hanging. And go ahead and remove the left front wheel. Now that you got the wheel off on the driver's side, and you want to go ahead and remove the axle nut. On my case, it was a 30mm 12-point socket. If your axle's ever been replaced, it could have a different setup or a different size. It also could have a cotter pin through it too, depending on if it's ever been changed or if it's the original one or not. So go ahead and remove the axle nut. Once you got the axle nut free, you want to be able to, if you can push the axle in a little bit and it has a little bit of play and a little movement, you're in good shape. If not, where that little divot is, you can put a punch in there and hit it and kind of jar it free until you get it, because what happens is it likes to rust into the hub, so you need to get that free. And once that's free, you also want to be careful not to flare the end of the axle, because if you do that, then you won't be able to get the nut back on. You have to replace the axle. And if tapping with a punch right in the middle, and if that doesn't come free, then there's an actual a special tool that you'll have to apply to push the axle through a little bit to break it free. And once you know it's free like that, so you got some play in it, go ahead and lift the car up a little higher. Or if you're doing this at home, get it up as high as you can. And then we're going to remove the 3 bolts here on the lower ball joint here. Once you got the bolts off the ball joint, the 17mm, you're going to take a large pry bar like this and pry the control arm down and pry the ball joint off, and you can push it off the side. And now you can pull the rotor and caliper and strut assembly away from the axle, and pull the axle out. So when you get the axle out, it'll look like this. And one of the ways that made it easier was actually to turn the wheel a little bit to the right, actually. And what that did is it extended the racking pinion and the tie rod out, so that gave me more room to pull the whole assembly away and pull the axle out of the hub of the rotor. Now we need to pop the axle itself out of the transmission. And the way you do it is you follow the axle up and you look between here. And what you're going to do is you're going to put a pry bar in between here, and you're going to pry the axle outwards with the pry bar, and with your other hand you're going to kind of hold the axle or slide it out. One thing that may help you out is using a tie strap like this and pull the spindle and everything out of your way. That way you have plenty of room to work. So after getting your axle popped out, you want to do is just take your side cutters and cut the clamps off here and here, and then take a razor blade and cut the boot off, and go ahead and remove the boot. So after cutting the clamps off, you can go ahead and cut the boot off with the razor blade, and just go ahead and remove it. Then you can take your axle here, and you can slide it out like that, and you can clean up all this grease here with rags and wipe this all off. And then we need to get these bearings off. Okay, now that you got most of the grease cleaned off, there's a little snap ring in here, so you're going to use some snap ring pliers, and you're going to take this snap ring off, and then this whole bearing will slide off. And you also want to keep track, you don't want to flip it upside down or whatever, so when you do it, just kind of keep an eye on how it came off, and kind of just set it down somewhere where you can just put it right back on the way you took it off. So once you get the snap ring off, I used some pliers like this and a flat blade screwdriver to kind of flare it out, and then put the screwdriver in between and pick it off. Then I used a little hammer, little brass hammer, and gave this a little tap, and it popped off. And then I set it with kind of the way it came off. So, and then I go ahead and clean up the rest of the grease on the axle shaft here. Wipe this down a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the new boot and we're going to slide it on after you match it up. So my new boot here came with a universal clamp. So yours may have a band clamp. But if you have the universal clamp, go ahead and get it in the ballpark where it fits over the new boot, like so, and it's pretty close. So it's going to look pretty close. So when you squeeze this tab here, it'll actually tighten up. So you know you're pretty close. Go ahead and slide the boot on. You're going to slide it like all the way on. So now that you get the boot on like this, now you can go ahead and put the bearing back on the way you took it off, and put the snap ring back on the end of the axle, on the axle tube. So after you got your new boot on, and you got your bearing back on and the C-clip back on, you're going to go ahead and take the piece here and you're going to clean out the old grease, and then you're going to take the new grease that comes with the kit, and you're going to put the new grease in the cup here, and then you're going to slide the cup on back the way it came off, and you're going to slide your boot on after you do that, and you're going to, on this axle here, it has 2 hash marks. You're going to slide, you want this part of the inner part of the boot to be in between the two. Then you'll put your clamp back on it if it came off, so like that, and you kind of make sure nothing like that. See how mine's sticking out like this, so I need to tuck it back inside and get that all situated. And then after you get that situated, you're going to use a tool like this, and that's going to go over the clamp here, and you're going to squeeze it. And if you don't have that, you can do it with a pair of side cutters, and you can put them in like that and squeeze them. Then you can line up the outer part of the boot and then put your clamp on and do the same thing. Usually you do this tool or this tool, and when you squeeze them, it's going to look like that. So see how it's squeezed in there on both sides like that. So you want to try to get it evenly. This tool does work best for it, but you can achieve the same thing with just a pair of side cutters. So now that the new boot is on, we need to go ahead and re-stab it back in the car. So you're going to go ahead and put it in the transmission, but you want to be careful not to nip the seal, and you want to use both hands and guide it in there gently. And if this cover's in your way, go ahead and fold that out of your way or take it off if you need to. So after you get it stabbed in the transmission, what I like to do is I like to hold my left hand. Since I'm right-handed, I like to hold my left hand on the boot and kind of center everything and hold it center. And I'll hold it, and I'll put the axle nut back on the threads like this. I'll thread it back on until it's flush right here. And with a rubber mallet, I'll hit it until it fully seats back into the transmission. So I went to tap it in. It only took like a couple little taps, and then it's flush inside there. So now once you got that in and flush, go ahead and take your axle nut back off. And since I already got it pulled out of the way, what we're going to do is we're going to stab the axle back through the spindle. So go ahead and stab it back in there, and take my strap off, and then go ahead and finish completely stabbing the axle through the spindle here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to line up we're going to pry our arm down here, and then line our ball joint back through the 3 holes here. Now that we got the ball joint stabbed back through, what I like to do is take a little blue Loctite thread sealer and put it on the threads. You can either put it on the nuts and the bolts and then put it in. Put a little on the threads like that, and then go ahead and start the bolts and torque those down to 76 foot-pounds each. And the reason why we put this Loctite on there is it helps prevent the bolts from vibrating loose and coming back off, and your ball joint falling out of the car. Now the ball joint's on and tight. Now we need to put our lug nut on, our axle nut on. And what I like to do is run it down with an impact gun, and then put my wheel on, and then with your hubcap off, you can still torque the axle nut. So what I do is I'll run this down with an impact gun until it's close in the ballpark. Then I'll put the wheel on and torque the wheel down. Then I'll lower the vehicle down all the way till the wheels are touching the ground. And I'll have a partner or somebody start the car and hold the brake for me while I torque this axle nut with a torque wrench to 160 foot-pounds. And the reason why it's important to torque these is because the squeezing motion of the axle and the axle nut itself is actually what holds the wheel bearing together. And if it's not the proper torque, it'll prematurely wear the wheel bearing out, or the axle will click back and forth, and it'll make a clicking noise. So you want to, and then once you got it tight, your axle is going to have a little groove in it. See this one here, I'll show you the groove. So once it's torqued, you want to where this groove is, what you want to do is you want to take it, once the axle nut is torqued, then you want to take a punch like this and put it on there and strike it and bend that into that little groove. And with that's like a lock washer, a locking device that prevents the axle nut from backing back off and coming loose. So you'll, like I said, you'll take a punch like so and strike it with a hammer and bend that tab in once you got the torque. And once that's done, then you can put your hubcap on. So now that you got the wheel torqued and the little thing pinged in, your hubcap back on, what I like to do is sometimes when you pop the axles out, they'll lose a little bit of transmission fluid. So I'll pop the hood and I'll start the car and I'll double check the level of the power steering fluid. If it's a little low, I'll top it off. Or if it's kind of in the ballpark, what I'll do is I'll test drive it first and then come back after it's nice and warm and double check the transmission fluid. You don't want to check it, you don't want to add too much cold because you can overfill it and that can cause problems. So once you got that verified, that completes the inner CV boot replacement on a 2005 Toyota Corolla. I'm Brian Eslick from How To Automotive, and I'd like to thank you guys for watching my videos. Encourage you to subscribe for more valuable videos like this. Thank you again.